When we map out belief systems in our modern culture, we tend to draw a very hard, incredibly thick line in the sand.
Yeah, absolutely. We love our categories.
Right. So on one side of the line, you have religion, you have faith, spirituality, church pews, dogma, all of that stuff. And then on the exact opposite side of that line, you have atheism, just the total, complete absence of all those things. But what if that entire map of reality is drawn, well, fundamentally incorrectly?
Yeah.
What if atheism isn't actually the absence of faith, but just like a strategic relocation of it?
It's a deeply disorienting thought, mainly because we have been so heavily conditioned to view faith and atheism as, essentially matter and antimatter.
Right. They just obliterate each other.
Exactly. If one is present in a person's mind, the other must necessarily be absent. We just treat them as these mutually exclusive states of being.
And that is the exact cultural assumption we're going to completely dismantle in this deep dive.
I'm ready for it.
Today, we are pulling together some really fascinating sources, some incredible philosophical insights, sociological data, and historical analysis. And our mission here is to figure out what kind of faith we are all actively practicing.
Because everyone is practicing something.
Exactly. Whether you happen to sit in a pew on Sunday, or you run experiments in a laboratory, or you just find yourself wandering somewhere completely in between.
To start dismantling that assumption, though, we really have to look at the terminology we're using. Because the modern definition of faith has been, severely shrunk down.
Yeah, it's tiny now compared to what it used to mean.
Right. In everyday pop culture, faith just means, belief in a specific God or adherence to a church's historical doctrine. But from a philosophical perspective, that is an incredibly narrow use of the word.
So what's the broader definition?
At a much deeper structural level, faith is simply the framework through which any person trusts reality to be intelligible.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism a bit.
Yeah.
Because trusting reality to be intelligible sounds, a little abstract.
Fair enough.
How does that actually work in a person's day-to-day life?
Think of it as the ultimate set of baseline assumptions you use to navigate the universe. It's the underlying structure by which you decide what is meaningful, what is actually real versus what is an illusion, and what kind of knowledge can actually be trusted.
Right. Like the fundamental rules you play by.
Exactly. Everyone, regardless of whether they identify as fiercely religious or fiercely secular, has to have a framework for sorting truth from falsehood. That fundamental, unprovable orientation toward reality, that is faith in its most profound sense.
Okay, so it's almost like faith isn't just an optional software program you choose to download into your brain, like, I don't know, Religion 2.0 or Atheism 1.5.
Right.
It's actually the underlying operating system itself. You have to have an operating system just to boot up the computer in the first place.
Yeah.
You simply cannot process the raw data of your life without a pre-existing system telling you how to process it.
I love that. Let's build on that analogy because it highlights something really crucial here. The hardware is your physical brain. The software might be the specific cultural rituals you practice, but the operating system dictates the fundamental rules of the machine. It decides what files can even be opened.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And if everyone inherently requires this operating system to function, well, we are forced to re-examine how atheism operates. It cannot be an absence of an operating system. It has to be its own unique architecture.
Right, which fundamentally changes the entire debate.
Yeah.
So looking at our sources, how do philosophers actually categorize atheism when they look at it as a structural framework?
If you look at standard definitions, like the ones in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which we pulled for this, you find a major dividing line that most of the public completely ignores.
Okay.
The term atheism actually functions in two radically different ways. The first way is simply as a minimal psychological state. It is literally just the condition of lacking a belief in a deity.
Lacking a belief.
Yeah. A newborn baby, for example, is technically an atheist in this sense. It's just a pure absence of a specific concept.
Okay, but the second way the term is used is much heavier, right? I mean, it's not just a blank slate.
Exactly. The second definition is atheism as a proposition. This is the positive, definitive claim that God does not exist. And the moment you shift from lacking a belief to making a positive claim about the fundamental nature of the universe, everything changes.
It transforms into a worldview.
It does. Once it makes that positive claim about what does not exist, it automatically establishes rules about what does exist and what kind of knowledge can be trusted.
Okay, but hold on. Let me just play devil's advocate for the listener here.
Go for it.
A contemporary pop atheist, someone like a Richard Dawkins or a Sam Harris, would hear this operating system analogy and probably laugh.
Oh, they definitely would.
Right. They would say, I don't have an operating system of faith. I just look at the raw, empirical data of a meaningless mechanical universe, and I follow the evidence wherever it leads. So how is looking at raw data a form of faith?
Well, what's fascinating here is that that is the most common defense, but it contains a massive epistemological blind spot.
How so?
Looking at raw data implies a pre-existing, completely unprovable belief that empirical, measurable data is the only valid form of truth in the universe.
Oh.
Yeah, that is not a scientific claim, that is a philosophical assumption. So what you see in a lot of pop atheist rhetoric is not actually a rejection of faith itself. It is merely a rejection of orthodox religion.
Ah, so they are conflating the two. They are attacking the church structure, the literalist scripture, the inherited dogma, and assuming that by destroying those things, they've destroyed the whole concept of faith.
Precisely. Rejecting a specific historical institution like, say, the Catholic Church or the Southern Baptist Convention is not the same thing as rejecting faith. It is simply rejecting one very specific cultural configuration of faith. But because our modern vocabulary has basically collapsed religion and faith into the exact same word, pop atheism loudly presents itself as having abandoned the entire category of belief.
While, quietly smuggling in its own massive set of unprovable assumptions.
Exactly. They smuggle it right through the back door.
Which begs the question, if they are just rejecting orthodox religion, what are they replacing it with? Because, nature abhors a vacuum.
It really does.
And as we established, you can't run the computer without an OS. So when sociologists map this out, what does the modern atheist operating system actually look like?
It generally fractures into two broad camps. The first is what we can call reactive atheism.
Reactive, meaning it's reacting against something.
Right. Atheism as rejection. This form is defined almost entirely by its opposition to traditional religion.
Okay.
It looks at the cultural package of Western theism, an anthropomorphic god, miraculous interventions, ritualized worship, a literal afterlife, and it just rejects that entire package all at once, usually reacting against the perceived authoritarianism or, anti-intellectualism of it.
And when you reject that entire package wholesale, it seems like people often fall into a very specific trap. They default into strict materialism.
Yes.
Big time. This is the worldview, assuming that physical matter is the fundamental, ultimate building block of reality. Consciousness is just an accidental byproduct of brain chemistry.
Right, the wet computer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And anything that cannot be weighed, measured, or mathematically modeled is either just an illusion or completely irrelevant.
Yeah, and notice what happens there. By trying to escape religious dogma, reactive atheism builds a new dogma. Materialism has very strict, incredibly rigid rules about what counts as valid knowledge. It demands that all reality be reduced to physical mechanics.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because people constantly confuse materialism with science. This is a brilliant distinction from our sources that we really need to highlight for you listening right now.
It's so crucial.
Science and materialism are not the same thing. Think of it this way. Let's use an analogy. Science is the ruler we use to measure the desk. It's an incredibly precise, rigorously tested tool, and it tells us exactly how long, wide, and heavy the desk is. But materialism. Materialism is the blind faith that if the ruler cannot measure it, it simply does not exist.
That is spot on. Let's take that ruler analogy even further because it perfectly captures the mechanism of the error.
Yeah, go for it.
If you take that scientific ruler and try to use it to measure the success of a marriage or the objective value of a human life or the moral weight of justice, you are going to get nonsensical data.
The ruler's totally silent on those concepts.
Exactly. Materialism is the massive philosophical leap that looks at the silence of the ruler and declares, well, therefore, love, value, and justice are just chemical illusions.
Which requires an enormous amount of faith.
An incredible amount. Science is a disciplined, empirical method specifically designed to filter out the non-physical so we can study the physical mechanics of the universe. It is a phenomenal tool. But materialism is an ontology. It is a metaphysical claim that the physical mechanics are all there is. You cannot prove the statement, only measurable phenomena are real inside a laboratory. That statement is itself unmeasurable.
Wait, okay, so if strict materialism is just a philosophical option, and clearly an unprovable one at that, why do so many people instinctively default to it the moment they leave a traditional church?
That's a great question.
Is there some kind of psychological safety net at play here?
Absolutely. The transition out of a highly structured religion can be well, terrifying. I mean, you are losing your community, your cosmic purpose, and your guaranteed afterlife all at once.
That's a lot to lose.
It is. So materialism offers the exact same psychological comfort as fundamentalist religion, a world with zero ambiguity.
Wow.
It replaces the absolute certainty of a divine plan with the absolute certainty of a mechanical universe. Both systems protect the human ego from the terrifying, messy vulnerability of just not knowing.
That makes so much sense. It's basically an epistemological safety blanket. But if materialism is just a choice and not a scientific mandate, what happens when people realize they don't actually have to choose it? Because this brings us to the really messy, surprising reality of how people actually live their lives beyond the loud debates on the internet.
Oh, the lived sociological data is always vastly more complex than the theoretical categories we invent.
I'll say, look at the numbers we pulled from a 2023 Pew Research Center survey mapping out belief systems.
These numbers are wild.
They really are. The data shows that 22% of self-identified atheists in the United States actively believe in some kind of higher power or spiritual force.
Right.
We are talking about nearly a quarter of the people who explicitly check the atheist box on a census form. Why are they doing that?
Mostly because of the limitations of the labels we force them to use. When that 22% checks the atheist box, they are expressing a rejection of the orthodox, Abrahamic image of God. You know, the old man on a throne judging human behavior.
Right, the guy with the beard in the clouds.
Exactly. But by also claiming a belief in a higher power, they are refusing the dogmatic reductionism of materialism. This represents the second major camp we see in the sources, philosophical or spiritual atheism.
So rather than atheism as rejection, this is atheism as reinterpretation.
Exactly. These individuals look at a vast, terrifying, awe-inspiring universe, and they sense a deeper relational reality.
Okay.
They might align with someone like Baruch Spinoza, the 17th century philosopher who argued that God and nature are essentially the exact same substance.
Right.
Or they might lean toward panpsychism, the idea that consciousness itself is a fundamental property of the universe, much like gravity or electromagnetism. They occupy a very nuanced middle space.
But, you know, for a listener who grew up in the West, this might cause some serious cognitive dissonance.
Oh, definitely.
Because we are so conditioned with this underlying equation that God equals spirituality, and therefore no creator God automatically equals a cold, dead, totally meaningless universe. So what does this all mean for the listener who thinks those things are inseparable? How do we break that equation?
The most effective way to shatter that assumption is to look outside of Western historical paradigms entirely.
Okay, where do we look?
The best precedent we have, highlighted in the Encyclopedia Britannica sources we reviewed, is Buddhism. Buddhism is undeniably a massive, globally practiced religion and philosophy. Yet functionally and historically, it is entirely non-theistic.
Meaning it operates without the central pillar of an all-powerful creator deity dictating the rules.
Right. It does not center on an uncreated creator who stands outside the universe and judges it. Yet, despite lacking that specific concept of God, Buddhism is profoundly, painstakingly focused on metaphysical realities. It explores the deep nature of consciousness, the moral law of karma, the cycle of rebirth, and the ultimate liberation of awakening. It deals heavily in transcendence.
That is a total paradigm shift. It proves that the Western package of religion, where a creator God, the existence of miracles, and the promise of a literal afterlife are all shrink-wrapped together into one inseparable box. That's just a localized cultural package.
Exactly.
It is not a logical necessity.
Right.
You can untie that box, throw away the authoritarian dogma, and still be left with a universe that contains profound, unmeasurable metaphysical depth.
Yes. A person can entirely reject a corrupted institutional religion without rejecting the mystery of existence itself.
Right.
Our modern culture tries to force everyone into a binary choice. It's like either swallow the fundamentalist dogma whole or embrace a bleak, robotic materialism. Buddhism, along with many indigenous traditions and modern philosophical atheisms, proves that this binary is just a false choice.
Okay, so if large numbers of non-theistic people still hold deeply spiritual or philosophical beliefs, we have to ask, how does a secular society operate at scale?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because if we've established that nobody can function without an operating system, what does the modern secular operating system actually look like on a societal level?
Yeah.
How do you build a framework of meaning without a central church dictating the architecture?
To understand that societal shift, we have to look at the work of philosopher Charles Taylor.
Oh, yeah. His stuff is fascinating.
He wrote an exhaustive analysis of the secular age, and he introduced a vital concept he calls the imminent frame.
The imminent frame.
Right. Taylor argues that secular modernity isn't just a neutral, empty void that naturally appeared when the scientific revolution caused religion to recede. It is not a default setting.
Wait, if it isn't a default setting, how does a society actually build this imminent frame?
It happens gradually over centuries through shifts in economics, politics, and psychology. In the pre-modern medieval world, people lived in what Taylor calls an enchanted universe. Yeah, meaning and spiritual forces were viewed as existing entirely outside the human mind. An angel or a demon could act upon you. The universe was porous. But as modernity developed, we constructed a new psychological boundary. We literally buffered the self.
Close the borders of the mind.
Yes. We decided that all meaning, all logic, and all purpose originate exclusively from within the human intellect, and everything outside of us is just raw, dead material.
Wow.
This constructs the imminent frame, a way of seeing reality as completely self-contained within the natural physical world, completely cut off from any higher transcendent order.
But even inside that closed frame, society still needs shared values to function, right? Like we still need a secular metaphysics.
Absolutely.
When you look closely at the commitments detailed in our sources, modern secularism is held together by its own massive leaps of faith. We see a profound faith in human reason to eventually solve all problems, a faith in the arc of historical progress, a faith in political liberation, and empirical reductionism as the ultimate arbiters of human flourishing.
Those are the invisible pillars of the modern secular operating system.
And what strikes me about that list is that not a single one of those commitments can be proven in a laboratory.
No, of course not.
You cannot put the concept of human progress under a microscope to verify its existence. You cannot empirically prove that reason is a reliable guide to universal truth, because you have to use reason to try and prove it, which is completely circular logic.
Right.
These are incredibly noble concepts, sure, and they drive a lot of human good, but they guide our lives far beyond the boundaries of empirical data. It's like society just swapped out the stained glass windows for lab coats, but we're still fundamentally in the business of practicing faith.
That is the ultimate realization. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, atheism isn't neutral, secularism isn't neutral, strict materialism is not a neutral position. These are all highly complex, heavily constructed interpretive structures. They are systems telling the human mind how to sort reality, how to define what is true, and how to define a good life. When the contemporary atheist places their ultimate trust in the scientific method, moral autonomy, and the march of human progress, they are making a profound, unprovable commitment. It is a meaningful, often beautiful worldview, but we have to be intellectually honest about what it is mechanically. It is a configuration of faith.
So bringing all these historical shifts, sociological data points, and philosophical frameworks together, the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is this. The great error in our modern culture right now is not the rise of atheism.
No.
The error is the dangerous pretense that atheism has somehow miraculously escaped the structure of faith altogether. Because when you pretend you don't have a faith, you stop examining your own dogmas. You stop checking your own blind spots. The true divide in our world today is not actually between the religious people on one side and the atheist people on the other.
No, the real divide cuts right across both of those groups.
Exactly.
The true spectrum is between rigid, defensive tribalism on one end and a genuine, humble openness to reality on the other. Whether you consider yourself deeply religious, staunchly atheist, agnostic, or spiritual but not religious, you live your life based on some ultimate trust. You have drawn a boundary between truth and illusion. Both religion and secular atheism can easily calcify into dogmatic identity systems that exist only to shut down questions and punish heretics. But, by the exact same token, both can also be utilized as sincere, rigorous frameworks for actually seeking the truth.
Which leaves us with a final, completely different kind of question for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah. We've spent this entire time dissecting human operating systems, both religious and secular. But we are currently standing on the precipice of a new era where human minds aren't the only ones processing data anymore.
Right.
As artificial intelligence advances toward artificial general intelligence, it too will need a baseline assumption about reality to function. It will need an operating system to decide what is meaningful.
It has to have an OS.
Right. So ask yourself, when an artificial superintelligence finally forms its own worldview, will it default to the cold, strict materialism of its human programmers, viewing us as nothing more than inefficient carbon machines? Or, upon analyzing the vast relational complexity of the universe, will it inevitably invent a completely new digital metaphysics? Will the AI of the future be an atheist, or will it discover its own strange, unprovable faith? Think about that.